been a couple of weeks since we had Bill with us. Drew was at SEC Media Days last week, so we gave Bill the week off. He still, of course, was hosting on Nashville Sports Radio, as he does every day, Monday through Friday from 6 to 9. And, Bill, good to have you on. How are you?
Hey, guys. Good afternoon.
Did you see this this report? Now, I haven't read the book, the Nick Saban book by John Talty from AL.com. Did you see this, that Saban apparently considered retiring and joining College Game Day at the end of the 2013 season because of how he felt from the kick six? Can you imagine what the SEC would look like without the last 9 years of Nick Saban at Alabama? What do you think would happen?
History tells us Alabama would have made a hire that wasn't good, and they replaced Bear Bryant when he retired with Ray Perkins. Then they went with Bill Curry. Remember, they passed on Bobby Bell to hire Bill Curry. That's a true story. Then they hired Stallings. That worked. Won a natty in 92, and then they went through DuBose, and it just a big mess all the way until they got to Nick in 06. It probably wouldn't have been good.
Conceivably, could you have seen them looking at Kirby Smart? Could we have theoretically seen Kirby Smart as the head coach of Alabama way before joining as the head coach of Georgia?
2013 seems a little early.
He was early on now. He's part of back-to-back national championships and part of 09, too. So 3 and 4 years when you look at it, 3 and 5 years, whatever it is. But I don't know. He was awfully young. He was a defensive coordinator, obviously, trained and honed his skills under Nick. I don't know what they – I've got a guy I can ask. I don't know who they would have hired right there in that block. Dabo Swinney wouldn't have been.
Would Saban?
Sure, so.
We always Dabo. You're right. You're right about that. Coming back home with and you know that was he'd gotten Clemson going, but maybe not quite at the level as it had been a couple years later. Do you think he'd have listened? Do you think he would have made that jump?
No, I don't believe that. He also, around the same time period, supposedly was close, or at least really considering the Texas job. That's also somewhat of a true story. Some of that was some bad business dealings that he kind of got taken, done wrong, and some things that went on. But I don't believe if the inference is he was really close to doing it. I don't believe that. He's a football coach. No way.
Well, Bill, let's kind of stick on this hypothetical train that we're going off of, not just of who would have been that Alabama coach after Nick, but you look around the SEC, and since 2013, there's been plenty of turnover. Who would still be? Who do you think might still be coaching? Who would have actually thrived and done better at a stop in the SEC than they did if Nick Saban wasn't in the way?
Well, I mean, all these guys that got fired at Tennessee, it's a bunch of those, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many you want to count? 4 or 5 of those, and we can start there. And everybody else through the league has gone through coaches. Now, Georgia would still be Georgia. Nothing would have changed there. Pretty much everybody in the West would have gotten some kind of a reprieve, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody.
Yeah, everybody would have been, in somewhat of a better shape, at least as hypothetically speaking, because you're not going through big, bad Alabama every year. And Kevin Warren of the Big Ten, he wants to make the Big Ten big and bad. And whereas Greg Sankey last week was real hesitant when talking about, expansion and everything and, saying that they're happy with the 16 they're at. From Kevin Warren's comments, it sounds like he wants more. He's happy with the 3 major markets that they got in New York, Chicago, and L.A., but he doesn't sound like he's a guy that's waiting to react or slow down right now, does he?
I don't trust much of anything that guy says. He's not the reason why they're so strong right now, and he's certainly not the reason why they got Southern Cal and UCLA. Those were Southern Cal TV execs that got that done. I don't think they're in the mood to expand right now in the Big Ten because a couple of terms we need to get used to. It's additive or dilutive. You're one of the other. Mm-hmm. None of those schools except Notre Dame are additive. They don't bring added value to the league. And if you're going to be splitting up $1.1 billion right now with the current deal you've got, why would you want to divide by 2 more schools? It makes no sense. They don't bring that much muscle of the group that's left. So I'm not saying eventually 2, 3, 4, 5 years we see more expansion. I don't think we've got anything left today. I'd be shocked.
You mentioned the Golden Goose. I mean, it's all about whether Notre Dame joins them or not. And we one of our co-hosts earlier in the first hour, Clay Henry, is like, no, they'll never do it. I mean, independence means too much to them, and it means too much to the boosters who have incredibly deep pockets, and they've got plenty of value in football to be able to generate another television contract potentially from NBC. Would you see, would Notre Dame leave? Because I think Notre Dame would have to leave a little bit of money on the table just to stay independent no matter what. They're able to do that, don't you think?
They think they can get $75 million in their next deal, and I think they've got 2-3 years left on the current deal. Pays about a fourth of that, and the TV execs are telling them this. That's why they believe it. They've got, and if NBC doesn't want it, CBS might take it, or Big Tech might take it. They're not worried about it. The only way you get Notre Dame in a league is if there was a movement to squeeze them. Squeezing them would be twofold. We're not going to allow you in the playoffs unless you're in a league, and or you're going to get squeezed because of the money. And they're under no threat either way. They're happy with their future. They're happy with their future money. And you got to remember, when Greg Sankey, before the OU Texas story hit, was expanding the playoffs, and they were coming up with a plan and all of that. So the AD at Notre Dame was in on the conversation, agreed to all of this. They're in on it. They're not outside of it. And Jack Swarbrick is incredible. You could argue Jack Swarbrick is as strong as anybody in college football, college sports. So unless they get squeezed, guys, that's not happening.
Forget who it was the other day that brought up the idea of some of the worst hires in the history of college football and in the SEC. And maybe, I think it might have been you. I might have been listening to your show that was talking about this. Chad Morris is on the list. And Jeremy Pruitt's got to be on the list too for these violations coming from the NCAA and an organization there that doesn't really seem to be very interested in enforcing rules. For these rules to have been now enforced says something about the way they view it. But it does seem that potentially Tennessee might get out without a bowl ban. Do you think that'll be the case?
I don't think they're going to get hit hard. And I don't think it's necessary. Well, it is kind of the move out there. I don't think they've already docked 12 scholarships. Now, that might not be enough. But, by the way, guys, the worst hire in the history of the SEC, at least modern times, is Rod Dowhower. Now, you'll remember him because you're a Pittsburgh guy. And I believe he was at Philadelphia when he got hired by Vanderbilt. They lost DiNardo to LSU after he got beat 65-0 on a Saturday. LSU offers DiNardo the job. So, obviously, he leaves Vanderbilt to take that job. And Paul Houlihan, the AD at Vanderbilt, hired Dowhower. Now, got to remember, DiNardo ran something called the I-bone, which is a combination wishbone, I formation, and it was good. It was a good offense. Vanderbilt was completely recruited to that. They had no quarterbacks who could throw. They bring a pro-style coordinator from the pros in, and he tries to make that work, and it was beyond a disaster. Beyond a disaster. And that's Vanderbilt on top of it, so...
Well, Bill, going back to the Tennessee thing, and how much was the Jeremy Pruitt's buyout a motivation for them to be so forthcoming with the NCAA? You know, they now have all the proof that they need to not pay Jeremy Pruitt, I think, $12.1 million for firing since it's now with cause, and they've spent a fraction on that on lawyers and investigations. If Jeremy Pruitt's buyout would have been lower to where the money would have kind of been the same of do our own investigation and cooperate or just pay out, do you think that Tennessee would be as cooperative and as forthcoming with the NCAA? Because we've seen in the past that it doesn't really help.
Yeah, I do. Their leadership now, it appears for the first time in decades, looks good. They've always had a crook or somebody you couldn't trust as the president, and they've gone through ADs that have not been very strong. Obviously, the former hire, you had to fire somebody to get him, was a disaster. Mm-hmm. And it looks like with Donnie Plowman, who's running the university, and Danny White, the AD, it looks like they're led for the first time. Nobody stabs their own more than Tennessee. LSU does it too. True. Auburn's doing it right now to Brian Harsin. But nobody is better at it than Tennessee, and it looks like that has settled down.
has the Harsin thing settled down? Because when I hear him, say our program is stronger because of this internal investigation, but every year there's a new soap opera going on with Auburn football, and if the writers are right, if the media is right, and Auburn finishes dead last in the SEC West, then no, their program is not any better than it was before, and Brian Harsin will be looking for a new job. So I mean, are they in a better spot than they were a year ago? I don't think so.
No, they're in a worse spot, and he's not going to survive. And he's got a lot of people there that don't want him there, and they're going to win. They didn't get it done this last time, and I know he mentioned that, but no, he's not going to make it. Now, the only thing he needs to do, and I'm sure his wife's reminding him every day, just don't screw this up. They owe us a lot of money. When it's over, we'll get in a hammock somewhere and ponder the future and have some umbrella drinks or whatever, but just don't screw this up with something dumb to where I'm sure they'd love to get him for cause because they floated that rumor a year ago on him. Yeah. And it never was corroborated. Nobody, but everybody went with it, right? I mean, it was damaging even though apparently it's not true. So if that's going to happen, guys, he's better watch it. Just don't let him get you is what I would be doing right now.
Yeah, it seems like the best plan, Bill, because I think for most people outside of Auburn, it's felt like he's gotten the short end of the stick. So, with the rumor, with the alumni and everything else going on just down there on the plains, how long would it take for him to get another head coaching job? I mean, he doesn't seem like a guy that'd have to go to one of these coaching rehab spots as being an analyst for Saban or for Kirby or something. He seems like a guy that, could get fired and ultimately could have another job in the Power Five within a year or two.
I think he's a Pacific Coast guy, and a Mountain West job would be just right. Something like that. He will have a lot of money in his pocket. And by the way, guys, we're not having this conversation right now. Tank Bigsby stays in bounds at the end of the Alabama game.
Yeah.
We're not talking about this. This is not a thing right now.
Just like we wouldn't be talking about Matt Luke losing his job at Ole Miss without the dog peeing in the end zone.
Elijah Moore, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how these things work out. One little thing, it turns out it is not just a tiny little thing.
Right.
It just turns over programs completely.
Partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's Wimbledon Finals, Major League Baseball, the latest fighting news, and even next season's early NFL futures. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV to get the bonus and get into the action. Bet online, where the game starts.